Read this sentence. The cold hand touched her neck. Somewhere in your body in the last 2 seconds, something happened. Your brain began simulating the scene before you finished the sentence. Your skin may have registered a faint tactile ghost across the back of your neck. In the same regions that handle real danger, something quietly began to stir. The parts that would fire if a real hand touched your real skin in a dark room. Nothing touched you. There is no hand. There is no her. There isn't even a neck. I made all of it up 2 seconds ago. 9 words on a screen. And your body responded as if part of it might really be happening, which raises a strange question. Not, why did that happen? A colder one. If your body cannot fully tell the difference between the story and the world, how much of what you call your life has actually happened to you? The phenomenon has a name. Neuroscientists call it embodied simulation, or narrative transportation, or neural coupling, depending on which lab is describing it. The friendly public version is simpler. Your brain does not just process a story, your brain runs it. Every sentence you read is executed inside you, staged, live, using a great deal of the same neural equipment your body would use to actually perform it. This is not just a metaphor. In 2010, a neuroscientist at Princeton named Uri Hasson puts subjects in fMRI scanners and has them listen to a woman tell a 5-minute story about her senior prom. What he finds challenges assumptions cognitive scientists had held for years. But to see why it does, we go back to a monkey in Italy. Parma, 1992. A neurophysiologist named Giacomo Rizzolatti runs a small motor neuron lab in a nondescript building at the University of Parma. His team spends years mapping the motor cortex in macaques, the exact patch of neurons that fires when the monkey reaches for a peanut, when the monkey grips the peanut, when the monkey brings the peanut to its mouth. Boring science. Necessary science. Nobody expects anything strange. Then one afternoon, a graduate student walks into the lab holding an ice cream cone. The monkey is wired up, resting between trials. The student raises the cone to his own mouth, and the recording equipment lights up. Not the visual cortex, not the eye channel. The motor cortex, the same neurons that fire when the monkey grabs a peanut, is firing while the monkey sits perfectly still watching a human eat an ice cream cone. The monkey's arm has not moved, but part of the monkey's brain seems to be moving with the human's. Rizzolatti calls them mirror neurons. The paper lands 4 years later, and it challenges the way scientists had been thinking about observation and action, because what he has begun to reveal in a small lab in northern Italy on a hot afternoon is that the boundary between watching and doing is thinner than the field had assumed. When you see another creature act, part of your brain runs the action alongside, silently, without your permission, in case you need to imitate, in case you need to flee. Now, put a book in your hands. You sit down on your couch after work, you open a novel, a character walks into a dark room. You feel the temperature drop a little, not because the temperature in your room dropped, but because your brain has begun simulating a cold room and your body is starting to respond as if that room were real. The character reaches for a light switch. Your right hand tenses slightly. The character finds a body on the floor. Your throat tightens. Your heart rate rises. A small drop of adrenaline enters your bloodstream. You have not moved from the couch. Your brain has moved you into the room. Most of the machinery reacting to that scene evolved hundreds of millions of years before fiction did. It was never given a special filter for made-up rooms, so it responds to a believable story in surprisingly similar ways to how it responds to the real thing. This is roughly what Hasson sees in the fMRI. When his subjects listen to the prom story, their brains do more than process language. Large parts of them synchronize with the brain of the woman telling the story. The same regions activate in the same sequence at close to the same time. Two people, one running simulation, coupled across the scanner. He calls it neural coupling. It is what happens between a mother and a nursing infant. It is what happens between two lovers falling asleep. And it is what happens when a stranger tells you about her prom. Storytelling is not just communication. It is a kind of brain-to-brain synchronization. There is a chemistry angle too. A neuroeconomist at Claremont Graduate University, Paul Zak, wires up subjects with IV lines and has them watch short films. A 2-minute story about a father with a dying son. He measures their blood before and after. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone your body releases when your child is born, when you hold someone you love, rises measurably. From a 2-minute film about people who do not exist, about a son who was never sick. The chemical reaction was real, the son was not. And in 2006, a psychologist at York University in Toronto named Raymond Mar tests habitual fiction readers against non-readers on standardized measures of empathy. The readers score higher, Not because they are nicer people, because they have, at a neural level, rehearsed thousands of other minds, practiced feelings that were never their own, sat in the driver's seat of thousands of strangers for hours at a time, and walked out slightly reshaped, which means, quietly, this. Every novel you have ever finished, every film you have cried at, every video game you have stayed up until 3 a.m. for was not just entertainment. It was your nervous system responding to a signal your ancestors evolved to trust. Cortisol rises, oxytocin releases, dopamine cascades, adrenaline briefly floods. You didn't just watch, you lived through part of it, and your body was built for the trip. And here's the part nobody talks about. You are exhausted at the end of the work week not just because of your work. You are exhausted because you have also, over the past 7 days, been a detective in Chicago, a widow in post-war Berlin, a spaceship captain 300 years from now, and possibly a woman being murdered in a British village. Each of those simulations pulled on real attention, real emotional energy, real physiological arousal, real recovery time. Modern entertainment is built to take advantage of these ancient mechanisms. The 8-hour Sunday binge is not an accident of your weakness. It is the product of thousands of hours of professional craft, aimed with real skill at a nervous system that evolved for firelight. The novel didn't just move you. It moved through you. And nobody is going to give you back the hours of attention you spent grieving a character who was never born. Nobody is going to reimburse your nervous system for the villains you have quietly fled inside it. You are running someone else's life inside your body. Right now, somebody wrote it. But here is the mercy. Because if the boundary is that thin, if part of you cannot fully tell a story from a life, then a strange gift is hidden inside the same trick. You are 70 years old. You will die once. Real death, real body, one time. But you will have lived through, by then, tens of thousands of lives. You will have rowed across an ocean in a wooden boat you never built. You will have loved a woman in 1830 who was never born. You will have held a dying grandmother in a village you never visited, in a country whose name you have forgotten. You will have escaped, been captured, been forgiven, murdered, fallen from cliffs, kissed strangers on train platforms, buried children who were only ink, forgiven fathers who were only voices, all without leaving your own body. Every human before writing had one life. Then someone drew a hand on a cave wall, and that person could experience two. You get thousands, not because they were real, because your body could not fully tell. You did not just read this story, you lived a small piece of it. And when you close this window and go back to your own life, you will bring that piece with you. A slightly different chemistry, a slightly reshaped nervous system, a quiet passenger. You are a story pretending to have a body. Every day. So choose the ones you let inside. Carefully. Because whatever you read tonight, whatever you watch, whatever you scroll through, will still be there tomorrow. A small piece of it, living quietly in your body, rewriting you, one page at a time.